The M15 bus was crawling through lower Manhattan traffic when the unthinkable happened. Victoria Blackstone, heiress to a $200 million textile empire, fell asleep on the shoulder of a mechanic in oil-stained coveralls who was holding a baby. Dead tired after a sleepless night closing a multi-million-dollar deal in Tokyo, she hadn't noticed who the man beside her was. But when she woke up and saw the mechanic's face, her blood turned to ice. It was Michael, her first love whom she'd abandoned 10 years earlier because he was too poor for her family. And that baby in his arms had the same emerald green eyes as Victoria. The truth she was about to discover would destroy her golden world and reveal a secret her mother had hidden for a decade. November 15th dawned gray and bitter over New York City, the kind of morning where the Hudson River fog crept between the skyscrapers like ghostly fingers. Victoria Blackstone emerged from Terminal 4 at JFK Airport, looking every inch the corporate warrior, despite 14 hours in the air from Tokyo. At 32, she carried the weight of the Blackstone textile empire on her shoulders, a legacy built over 3 generations of ruthless ambition and strategic marriages. The bathroom mirror in the first-class lounge reflected the cost of success. Her eyes, once bright emerald green, were now shadowed with exhaustion. 48 hours without sleep, sustained only by black coffee and adrenaline. The Japanese partners had negotiated until the last second, fighting over every clause, every percentage point. But she had won $50 million for a production chain that would catapult Blackstone Industries into the Fortune 500. 3,000 jobs, factories in Tokyo, Osaka, Seoul, and Bangkok. Her mother would have been proud, or at least would have nodded, which from the late Eleanor Blackstone was the highest praise possible. Victoria adjusted her Saint Laurent suit, navy with gold buttons, $12,000 of fabric that functioned like armor. In the business world, appearance was half the battle, her mother had taught her. The other half was being more ruthless than everyone else. The terminal was nearly deserted at 6:15 a.m. Her Louboutin heels echoed through empty corridors like a metronome. Click, 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 the rhythm of a life measured in quarterly earnings. In her Hermes bag, 3 phones buzzed incessantly. The board wanted details. Legal needed signatures. PR was pushing for a press release. The Wall Street Journal had already caught wind of the deal. In the VIP parking garage, her black Bentley Continental GT waited like a sleeping panther. $600,000 of British engineering, custom-fitted with bulletproof glass, and an interior of leather from cattle raised in the Colorado Rockies. An absurd luxury, but in her world, absurdity was currency. She pressed the start button. A click. Nothing. She tried again. Just a metallic clicking, then silence. The battery, dead after 2 weeks in the November cold. Even the best British engineering had surrendered to New York winter. Victoria stared at the dashboard in disbelief. Not today. The meeting with the Yamamoto investors was set for 8 o'clock sharp on Wall Street. Punctuality in Japanese business culture wasn't just courtesy, it was honor. Being late would be tantamount to disrespect, could jeopardize the entire follow-up deal worth another $100 million. She grabbed her phone. James, her driver for 15 years, was on vacation in the Hamptons, his first break in 2 years. The Bentley Service Center didn't open until 8:30. AAA would take at least 40 minutes to arrive in morning traffic. Through the parking garage window, she saw the bus stop. M15 Select Bus Service. The sign read. The next bus would arrive in 7 minutes. It ran from JFK through Queens into Manhattan. It was absurd. Victoria Blackstone hadn't taken public transit since Yale 12 years ago, when she was still Vicky and didn't know she'd inherit millions. But what choice did she have? She ran. Actually ran. The heiress to an empire. In her $1,000 shoes across wet asphalt. The cold November wind tore at her perfectly styled hair. The Hermes bag banged against her hip. It was surreal, grotesque, almost comical, if it weren't so desperate. The bus rounded the corner just as she reached the stop. An old MTA bus, blue and white, scarred by years of New York winters. The driver, a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a thick Brooklyn accent, looked surprised as she climbed on, panting. The search for change in her purse was farcical. Between platinum credit cards and $100 bills, she finally found a crumpled $5. The driver sighed and made change while other passengers waited behind her, their impatience palpable. The smell hit her like a wall, not unpleasant, but overwhelming in its foreignness. Cheap coffee from bodega cups, drugstore deodorant, wet wool, cigarette smoke clinging to clothes, disinfectant from the last cleaning. It was the smell of the working class, of people who got up at 4 a.m. to keep the city running. The bus was already packed. Nurses in scrubs coming off night shift, construction workers heading to sites in Manhattan, a Dominican family with sleeping children, 2 elderly Chinese women discussing something in Cantonese, a young man with a guitar case. Victoria moved through the aisle toward the back, her $300 per ounce French perfume cutting through the smells like an alien presence. People looked up, assessed her briefly, looked away. She was an anomaly in their world, a peacock among pigeons. Only one seat remained empty in the very back row, next to a man who looked like he'd worked through the night. His blue coveralls were stained with oil and grease, hands blackened under the nails. He held a bundle in his arms, wrapped in a faded baby blanket with tiny teddy bears on it. The man noticed her and automatically shifted toward the window, making room. It was a small gesture, reflexively polite, from someone used to taking up as little space as possible. Victoria sat without looking at him, already absorbed in her digital world. Emails exploded across her screen. The Nikkei had just closed. The NYSE would open in 2 hours. Numbers, charts, projections. The language she spoke better than English. The bus lurched forward into the New York morning. Through fogged windows, the city was an impressionist painting. Lights blurred into golden streaks. Buildings dissolved in the morning mist. It was a dream world, unreal, yet very real. The heat in the bus was oppressive. The heating system battled against November cold. Victoria felt her eyelids growing heavy. The engine's vibration, the gentle rocking, the monotonous humming, everything conspired against her determination to stay awake. Beside her, the baby stirred in its sleep. The man, Michael Thompson, though she didn't know it yet, adjusted his hold minutely, rocking the child with a movement as natural as breathing. He'd perfected this motion through hundreds of sleepless nights, when little Matthew couldn't sleep, when teeth were coming in, when the world was too loud for tiny ears. Michael risked a furtive glance at the woman beside him. She was obviously out of place. The suit alone probably cost more than he made in 3 months. But there was something in her face, an exhaustion he recognized, the exhaustion of someone who'd fought too hard for too long. The bus stopped in Queens. More commuters squeezed on. An elderly lady with a walker, a student with an enormous backpack, 2 teenagers sharing earbuds. Life in all its varieties crammed into this rolling microcosm. Victoria fought against sleep. She typed responses, signed digitally, made decisions that moved millions while sitting in a bus that cost $2.75 to ride. The irony was lost in her exhaustion. The first time her head tilted sideways, she corrected immediately. The second time, it took longer before she straightened. The third time, her head found the man's shoulder and stayed there. Michael Thompson froze. The scent hit him like a punch from the past. Jasmine with a note of something indefinable. Something that was uniquely Victoria. 10 years had passed, but his body remembered. His hands remembered. His heart remembered the rhythm it had beaten when she was near. He didn't dare breathe, didn't dare move. If he moved, she would wake. If she woke, this impossible moment would end. So he sat, stiff as a statue, while the woman he'd loved more than his own life slept against his shoulder. The bus continued through Queens, entering the Midtown Tunnel. Other passengers smiled, thinking they were witnessing a tender family moment. The well-dressed woman asleep against her blue-collar husband, their baby peaceful between them. If only they knew the truth. Michael's mind raced backward through time. 10 years ago, they'd been everything to each other. He was working his way through night school for engineering. She was finishing her MBA at Columbia. They'd met at a coffee shop in the village. She'd spilled her latte on his textbook, insisted on buying him a new one, and somehow they'd ended up talking until dawn. 6 months of secret happiness followed. Secret because Victoria knew her mother would never approve. Eleanor Blackstone had plans for her daughter that didn't include a mechanic from the Bronx, no matter how smart or ambitious he was. Then came the ultimatum. Eleanor had discovered the relationship and given Victoria a choice. End it immediately, or watch Michael's family be destroyed. Eleanor had manufactured evidence that Michael's father had embezzled from his employer. It was false, but it would hold up long enough to ruin them. Victoria had chosen her family's empire over love, or so Michael had thought until 9 months later, when he received an anonymous call that changed everything. Baby Matthew stirred in his arms, making a small sound. Michael adjusted his hold, whispering soft words. At 6 months old, the baby already showed distinctive features: the aristocratic nose, the determined chin, and most of all, those emerald green eyes identical to his mother's, the mother who believed he had died at birth. The bus emerged from the tunnel into Manhattan, crossing through Midtown toward downtown. Each stop brought them closer to the moment when Victoria would wake, when the past would collide with the present in ways neither of them could predict. As they passed through Murray Hill, then Gramercy, then toward the financial district, Michael counted each stolen moment. He memorized the weight of her head on his shoulder, the warmth that radiated through his coveralls. These few minutes were all he would ever have of her again, he thought. He didn't know how wrong he was. The bus hit a pothole at 14th Street, jolting everyone. Victoria woke with a start, disoriented, taking a moment to remember where she was. She began to straighten, ready to apologize formally to whoever she'd been leaning against. Then her eyes met his, and time stopped. Michael. The name exploded in her mind. Michael. Her. Michael. It was impossible. Yet here he was, real, solid, inches from her. The same warm brown eyes she'd loved, now lined with small wrinkles. The same gentle features, now hardened by work. The same hands that had once caressed her, now calloused and marked. For a moment, neither moved. The bus, the passengers, New York itself disappeared. They existed in a bubble of disbelief and memory. 10 years compressed into an instant. All the love, all the pain, all the regret crystallized in that look. And then Victoria's gaze dropped to the baby in Michael's arms, and her world shattered completely. The silence between them was thicker than the Manhattan morning fog. Victoria remained frozen, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Michael, her Michael, after all these years, sitting beside her on a public bus with a baby in his arms. Her gaze locked onto the infant, and in that moment, her world finally, completely fractured. The baby had just opened his eyes, emerald green like her own. The Blackstone legacy, unmistakable through generations.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Stamped on that 6-month-old face, her mind raced backward like a film in reverse. 10 years and 9 months ago. Their last night together before her mother's intervention. The desperate passion of two people who knew it would be the last time. Then the weeks of nausea she'd attributed to stress. The sudden spa retreat to Switzerland her mother had insisted upon. The 9 months in that luxury clinic in Geneva. The stillborn baby. The lie. Rage rose in her throat like bile. Her mother had lied to her for all these years. Eleanor Blackstone, dead 2 years now, had taken the secret to her grave. Or so Victoria had thought. The delirious words on her deathbed, the ramblings about doing what was best for the baby, that everyone had attributed to morphine-induced hallucinations, suddenly took on terrible meaning. Michael watched as understanding dawned on her face in waves. Shock, disbelief, pain, rage. He'd known this moment would come eventually. New York was big, but not big enough to hide forever a baby with the Blackstone eyes. The bus emptied partially at the Wall Street stop. In the relative quiet that followed, Michael spoke in a low voice, telling her the essentials. The anonymous call 9 months after their separation. A crying woman claiming to be a nurse from the Swiss clinic. The baby was alive, would be given up for adoption to a British couple. He had 2 hours to present himself with paternity documents if he wanted to save his son. The frantic race across New York. A terrified woman in an anonymous apartment in Brooklyn who had handed him the baby and documents before disappearing. Since then, Michael had raised Matthew alone. 3 jobs to make ends meet. A 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx instead of the Blackstone mansion. Victoria listened as her world crumbled and rebuilt itself around her. Matthew, her son had a name, had grown up just miles from her. All those missed moments, the first smile, the first sounds, the first everything. Stolen by a mother who thought she knew what was best for her daughter. They got off at the next stop in a daze. Battery Park welcomed them with wet benches and aggressive pigeons. Michael continued his story without bitterness, only infinite sadness. Eleanor's threats against his family. The false evidence that his father had stolen from his employer. The impossible choice between love and his family's destruction. Victoria in turn revealed what she knew. The private investigator's documents she'd started following 3 months earlier, always hitting dead ends. Now she understood why. Eleanor had orchestrated everything with military precision, underestimating only a father's love and determination to save his child. Matthew started crying, and Michael gave him a bottle with practiced ease. Victoria watched, mesmerized. These hands she'd once loved, now rough and marked, but infinitely gentle with the baby. All those gestures she should have shared, learned, lived. The sleepless nights, the first teeth, the first fever. Stolen by a mother who thought she knew best. Victoria returned to her penthouse on the Upper East Side like a sleepwalker. The 3 floors of minimalist luxury, the view of Central Park, the contemporary art on the walls, it all seemed like cardboard scenery. The following hours were spent excavating her mother's archives. Eleanor had catalogued everything with obsessive precision. In the safe behind the Basquiat painting, Victoria found the folder labeled Project M. The documents told a story of manipulation worthy of the Borgias. Receipts from the Swiss clinic, falsified death certificates, payments to corrupt officials, and a diary. Pages and pages in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, justifying the unjustifiable. According to her mother, she had saved Victoria from a mediocre life. A mechanic couldn't be the father of a Blackstone heir. The baby would be better off with a British upper-class family. But someone, the diary didn't specify who, had warned Michael. Eleanor had let him take the baby, convinced that a single mechanic wouldn't last long. Eleanor's miscalculation was evident on every page. She had underestimated love, determination, a father's strength. While she maneuvered stocks and mergers, Michael changed diapers. While she built an empire, he built a human being. The last entry, written with a trembling hand a month before her death, was barely legible. Victoria must never know. I did it all for her. Someday she'll understand I saved her. Victoria hurled the diary against the wall. Saved? From what? From love? From motherhood? From happiness? The next morning she appeared in the Bronx, transformed. No designer clothes, no high heels, jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back simply, face bare of makeup and defenses. Michael opened the door of his small apartment with Matthew in his arms. The apartment was small but clean. full of colorful toys and photos of the baby at every stage of growth. 6 months of life documented with obsessive love. Victoria observed this parallel world where her son had grown up. The IKEA crib instead of the designer piece, clothes from Target instead of boutiques. Yet Matthew laughed, healthy and happy. They started with small steps. Victoria came every day, learning the rituals of motherhood under Michael's patient guidance. How to hold a bottle, how to change diapers, how to burp a baby. Simple gestures that for her were monumental conquests. Weeks turned into months. Victoria had consulted New York's best lawyers, but the legal situation was complex. Michael was the recognized father, had raised Matthew exemplarily. A court battle would hurt the child most of all. Instead, they built a strange routine. Victoria arrived in the mornings when Michael left for the garage. She spent the day with Matthew in the small apartment, learning to be a mother between the narrow but warm walls. When Michael returned, they ate dinner together, 3 people connected by blood and separated by history. It was Matthew, in his innocence, who began building bridges. His smiles didn't discriminate between the CEO mother and the mechanic father. His little hands reached equally for her perfumed hair and his calloused hands. Michael watched Victoria transform. The hard businesswoman became tender before her son. The ruthless negotiator melted at a gummy smile. He saw the girl he'd fallen in love with 10 years ago re-emerging. One evening, while Matthew slept, they sat on the small balcony overlooking the Bronx rooftops. They talked about the dreams they'd had, the lives they'd lived, the choices that had been made for them. Victoria made a decision that shocked the New York business world. She sold the Upper East Side penthouse and bought a house in Michael's neighborhood. She restructured her professional life, delegating more, reducing commitments. For the first time, she put something before profits. The media went crazy. The Blackstone heiress moving to the Bronx, seen in sweats at the bodega. Victoria ignored it all. She had more important things to do, like learning the songs that made Matthew laugh. A year after the bus encounter, life had found a new harmony. Victoria had learned to be a mother, not perfect, but present. Michael had accepted her help to finish his engineering degree. Matthew thrived, surrounded by both parents' love. Matthew's 2nd birthday was celebrated in Pelham Bay Park. Nothing luxurious. Homemade cake, decorations from the dollar store, neighborhood kids invited. Yet the joy on Matthew's face was worth more than any exclusive party. During the party, as they watched Matthew play with other children, Michael took Victoria's hand. The gesture, simple but meaningful, sealed what both had known for some time. The love had never really died. It wasn't easy. Some of Victoria's colleagues thought she'd lost her mind. Some of Michael's relatives feared a second disappointment. But they moved forward, step by step. The Blackstone empire continued to thrive, now run with different principles. Victoria implemented family-friendly policies, on-site daycares, equal opportunities. Paradoxically, the business performed better than ever. One evening, Michael showed her a ring. Not diamonds, but steel, forged by himself in the workshop. Victoria accepted it with tears of joy. It was perfect in its imperfection. They married at City Hall, with Matthew crawling between their legs during the ceremony. No $1,000 dress, no reception for $500, just the 3 of them and a few close friends. 5 years later, the Thompson-Blackstone family, they had combined names, boarded the M15 bus for a special trip. They were going to Greenwood Cemetery to visit Eleanor's grave. Victoria had finally forgiven, understanding that her mother, in her twisted way, believed she was protecting her. Matthew, now 7, sat between his parents with his green eyes full of curiosity. Michael, now an engineer at a Manhattan firm, held one of the boys' hands. Victoria, still CEO but with redefined priorities, held the other. During the ride, Victoria told Matthew a simplified version of their story, how people sometimes lose and find each other, how love overcomes all obstacles, how mistakes can be forgiven. The boy listened with the innate wisdom of children, understanding the essential. He was born from love and lived in love. At the cemetery, they placed wildflowers on Eleanor's grave. Simple, genuine, like the life they'd chosen. Matthew spoke to the grandmother he'd never known, with words that moved his parents. He'd learned there are many ways to love, and the most beautiful is the one that unites instead of divides. They rode the M15 back home, symbolically closing a circle. As the bus crossed through New York, Victoria reflected on the journey taken. From spoiled heiress to ruthless businesswoman, from mother deprived of her child to present and imperfect mother. Each phase had been necessary to reach this moment of peace. Michael looked at his family with quiet pride. The never-dead love for Victoria, the joy of seeing Matthew grow with both parents, the finally completed degree. It wasn't the life he'd imagined at 20, but it was better because it was earned. That evening, while they prepared dinner together in their normal kitchen, Matthew asked if he could have a sibling. The parents exchanged a knowing smile. Victoria instinctively touched her belly, where the second miracle of their story was already growing. Still a secret. The M15 bus passed under their windows at that exact moment. Its familiar rumble like a greeting. It was more than public transport. It was witness to how fate, even when it seems cruel, sometimes knows exactly what it's doing. As New York slept, the family prepared for the night in their simple but loving home. Victoria had learned the most important lesson. True wealth isn't counted in millions, but in moments like this, a dinner together, a laughing child, a husband you love, and the promise of a future built on truth instead of appearances. The M15 continued its route through the city, carrying other stories, other fates. But for Victoria, Michael, and Matthew, it had already performed its miracle. It had reunited a family that wasn't supposed to exist, healed wounds that seemed unhealable, proved that true love knows no class boundaries, only the courage to choose it every day. Like if you believe love overcomes all social barriers, comment which moment touched you most. Share to inspire others who believe in everyday miracles. Subscribe for more stories about second chances and found families. Sometimes fate makes us lose our way to help us find the right one. Sometimes we must lose everything we thought was important to discover what truly matters. And sometimes a simple bus can transport more than just passengers. It can transport destinies that reunite, love that is reborn, and families that come together against all odds.